Hey, what's going on everyone? Just a little disclaimer before we get into this video that there was some shaky camera movement because a lot of it I was laying on the ground, so it's really hard to keep it stable. So just understand the camera angle is a little shaky. It's a little difficult to get the perfect camera angle, you know what I mean. And then also there's a couple moments where he was picking up super heavy stuff, the master mechanic, and I just want to let you know, if you're not the strongest person in the world, like stinking Hercules over here, that you could drop something on your face and potentially hurt yourself. So just know your limits when you're doing this. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the ZHP Garage. Today we are going to be not working in the garage because we're kind of tied up with room. We're going to be going to a location and working on an 07 Chevy Silverado. We're going to be pulling the 4L60E transmission out of it, but it's the same from 99 to 07, the way it's configured and bolted into the truck. So we're going to go over to the location that we're going to be working on it, and we're going to get with the master mechanic, see what he has going on, and let's get this thing started.
All right, so today we're being a little bit of a little mobile mechanic. We're going to show you how to pull a tranny. We're pulling a 4L60E transmission on this four-wheel drive 07. We're going to pretty much do it with basic hand tools, no air tools, nothing fancy, just a floor jack, a couple jack stands, some cardboard just to have a little cushion, easier to slide around on underneath the car. I'm going to get this thing up. I'm gonna explain as I go what you need, what tools, everything. So we're gonna get into this. All right, so we're gonna jack this thing. We're gonna jack a little bit back on the frame, so we have room to put the jack stand on the front of the frame. You don't want to get it too high at the beginning because you need room to reach everything. If you get it too high, then you're just stretching for no reason. So just get it up at a decent height to get underneath it, move around, depending on your jack. I normally go about as high as this jack will go without using any sort of block or anything. And I put the jack stand all the way forward before the radius, so I don't have to worry about it kicking the jack stand out. So you want on a nice flat spot. And then I count the notches, so the truck's pretty much level. So I'm gonna put that there, and then I'm gonna go over to the other side and do the same thing. So now we got the truck up on stands leveled out. We wanna spray a little penetrating oil on the exhaust bolts first thing and let it sit a second. Soak in while you do set everything else up. I wanna spray the exhaust bolts on the exhaust system. So the two here, because I got to take this white pipe off. So I'm going to do these two and then the three on each side on the collectors with some penetrating oil, because I want them to come, part pretty easy, and I want it to sit a second. So while that's sitting, I'm going to spray them, and then while that's penetrating, I'm going to take the drive line out, and I want to drain the fluid and stuff out of the transfer case. And then once I get the exhaust out of the way, I'm going to pull the pan off. I want to drain the fluid out of the pan because you want to keep your leaking and mess to a minimum. And being that we're going to rebuild the transmission anyways, we don't need to have it full of fluid while we're taking it down and leaking. That's why we're putting the cardboard down. So we're just going to spray just some whatever penetrating oil you have. Just spray the head of them, and then we'll do the flange and do the three flanges on each side. And on the passenger side, the O2 sensor blocks the nut you need to take off for the flange. So you want to spray the O2 sensor threads too, or the head, so it can soak into the threads, because you need to take that O2 sensor out of the way to get the exhaust out. So spray pretty good on this O2 sensor on the passenger side. I'm gonna let that soak in. I'm gonna drain the transfer case now, and then I'm gonna pull the front and rear drive line out, and then we're gonna work on getting the transfer case out of the way. So we're gonna drain the transfer case. First we wanna take the fill plug out so it doesn't chug when you take the bottom out. It's 18 millimeter. Take the fill plug out first, and you still might have some fluid come out of it when you pull it, so make sure you're ready to catch it. We take the drain out. When it starts to get pretty loose, when you think you can get it with your hand, you grab your pan and get it close at an angle so you can catch it without it splashing everywhere and going crazy. So obviously we got to fill this again when we're done. So we're just going to put the fill plug in a couple threads. We don't need to tighten it up, but the drain we're going to tighten back up. So just give it a little wipe, get all the debris out of the way, and then throw your drain plug back in. And don't get crazy, it's aluminum, so you can crack it. So pretty much just go snug, and then maybe a turn or so. So now the transfer case is drained, we're gonna pull the rear drive line. So we're gonna take the caps off. So those are 11 millimeter, or you can use a 7/16 wrench. You can use whatever you can get on there, but I'm gonna use a wrench. So I'm using 11 millimeter. It's got 4 bolts. There's 2 U-joint straps. So this is on where the truck's at right now is all flat. So we don't have the tires blocked or anything. We're not worried about going anywhere. There's no crazy angles. This is a totally flat cement concrete area. And it's on stands, so we don't have the tires blocked or anything. But if you're on an incline, decline, you want to make sure to have some good blocks. It'd be easier to pop it out of gear first so you can move the drive line, but we don't have that issue, so it's still in park. And then normally the U-joint gets kind of tight, it gets kind of stuck, so you kind of need a pry bar or something. You want to come in here and pry against the pinion nut and pop it out. Then it'll just slide forward to get it out. If you're really careful, if you're really worried about making a mess, you want to go back to the front on the slip yoke and then slide a rag or something over it as you bring it out, because it'll drip a little bit. So now I'm going to go to the front because I really don't want to make a mess on this guy's concrete. So you can see that the slip yoke is all the way in because it slides up when we take it off the pinion. So just use a rag or something, and you want to catch any drips, and it'll just slide out. And then you're trying to get fluid run out of the slip yoke. So I normally just set it on a rag in case it drips. It doesn't leak all over the concrete. So just push it back. Then I'll take a rag and fold it up so it's got a little absorbance. And I'll just set the pinion or the slip yoke on the rag, and it kind of keeps it from getting scraped up on the concrete, and it catches any drips. That's out of the way. We'll just leave that there. So now we're gonna take the front drive line out. But since the rear's out, even though it's in park, there's nothing holding it in place. So you have to use a pry bar, and then hold it, break the U-joint cap, bolts loose, and then you can hold it if it spins at that point. Same thing, it's got the 4 bolts, two straps. It's pretty much the same as the rear on this side. So you pop it back, clips on the U-joint to hold it straight. This one gets rusted in there pretty good. Okay, but the difference is on the transfer case side. So you just get this above the differential, let it sit up there, and then you come to the other side. The only difference is on this side, this is pretty much just a dust boot, but it's got a clamp. So what I normally do is I just take the clamp off. So I just use a pair of dikes and take the clamp out of the way, which has its own set of battles because you're limited on space. Careful with it, you can reuse it. Then you pop the boot off because it's in kind of a groove. And then once you get the boot off, you got to hold the drive shaft above the front differential, and you slide it forward, and it uses like all the real estate possible to go forward. And then you kind of got to go opposite. So then you got to go above the transfer case, bring it back to drop the front down first to get the front drive line out. A little dance you do, a little two-step. I just throw it in the back, and I lay the splines on the same rag. So you might have to open it back up a little bit. You can lay both of them on the same rag. So now that we got that out of the way, we need to get the exhaust out of the way now. So we have 4 O2 sensors. So we have their upstreams. Okay, so this side is just getting unplugged. Then you have your post, your downstream O2s. So this is just getting unplugged. But like I said on the passenger side, the front one, as you can see on the front or on the passenger side, see how it blocks the nut for that stud to get the exhaust down? So that O2, we need to unbolt it from the exhaust to get it out of the way to get the nut off. So that one you can unplug, or you can just undo it, but the harness gets a little wadded up, so we need to unplug it so we can get that O2 out of the way. We need to take that one out of the exhaust so we can get to the nut. All the other ones, here's the post O2 downstream, that one's just gonna get unplugged. So all of them get unplugged. The other 3, the only one that needs to get unbolted is the passenger side, but not all of them are in the way of the nut. So it just depends on what year. They kind of rotate them a little bit. So that's the one you got to unbolt. So we're going to unplug the O2 sensors now, and then we're going to unbolt the passenger O2 and get these exhausts out of the way. All right, so we got our nuts out and our bolts, but it didn't go as planned. So the 2 bolts where the Y comes to the exhaust broke. I'll show you what you could do if you have this issue. But the 3 bolts on the flange on each side, all of them came out good except one was a real punk. It's a little harder. These things get extremely tight from the heat cycles. You know, this thing's got like 160,000, 180,000 or something on it. So with all the heat cycles and the ruts and everything, they get on there really tight. So if you don't have an impact to like shock them and break them loose, you try to do it by hand. It tries to round off. One thing leads to another. So we had one that was a real punk. But we got it off. So now we're gonna get the cross member out of the car so we can get the exhaust out. You gotta be careful on these. You wanna use a 6-point socket, preferably an impact, less likely to round the edges. All right, so now we're gonna take the cross member out of the way so we can get the exhaust out. 2 nuts here on the mount, they're 15s. Okay, got the 2 nuts out. Then we got the 2 bolts on both sides. We got a jack supporting the whole transfer case and everything, because once we get this out of the way and the exhaust out of the way, I want to take the pan off, drain the fluid out of the tranny. So that's why the transfer case is still on it. Plus you gotta get the cross member out of the way before you can get the transfer case off of it. But anyways, we're taking the cross member off now. Okay, now we got the cross member out of the way. Now we can get the exhaust out because the exhaust got to come off to the side here. So it pretty much fell when I got the cross member out. So it's kind of a little snake in action on these little clips here to get them out. If you don't have the tool, you know, if you're on the fly, you can use a pair of dikes because it's got a little point. Obviously don't cut, but you can sneak it in there and you can use it to pry the little clips out of the retainers. So it's a little tip, you can use a pair of dikes. So now we got the exhaust out of the way. Shove that up here for a minute. Now we need to get the mount actually out of the way because there's a nut on the bottom for the transfer case. All right, so we got that out of the way. Throw that back here. So now we're gonna get the shifter out of the way. Just use a screwdriver. Just pop it off the front. Okay. There's a little clip right here, little clippy do, and all that does is keep the little locking tabs pushed out. So now you got to push them in. There's two of them. You slide in and get the shifter out of the way. So you can just throw that up over here, out of the way for a minute. Okay. So now I want to. This isn't in the way. This is okay. You can snake the pan around it, so you don't need to move that. If you do need to move it, you can go in here and give it a little pry, push it away. But normally it's not in the way, so we won't worry about that. But we want to take the tranny pan down because we want to dump all the fluid. But first we can get the heat shield off of this side. So it's just two 10mm bolts. And then we want to take the pan off and we want to catch the fluid. We're going to dump the fluid in it so it doesn't continuously drip on us the whole time. All right. Throw that back here out of the way. We want to have a controlled, so we want to loosen up. We want to take one corner out so the pan drops down into a corner so we can control the fluid. We're going to start up here in the front. Just work your way around. Then you come back here, you just want to start loosening them up a little bit so the pan doesn't get all crazy. As soon as you hear it start coming loose, it's a messy process anyways. We've already got a mess going on over here. Just tighten that guy back up. It wants to leak everywhere, but where you want it to leak. Sounds about right, huh? That's why you put the cardboard down. So here we're just dropping the pan down. We're just dumping the fluid, draining the fluid out of it. We're not, you know, all we're worried about is draining the fluid so it doesn't leak everywhere, taking the rest of the tranny out. So just pull the pan down, put it right back up. That's all we're doing. So you gotta take the starter down to get to the converter bolts. That's what we're gonna do next. So we're just gonna take the negative side of the battery off so we don't have any battery welding. And we just set it down here, make sure it doesn't, you know, come back up and touch somehow. So now we're gonna go underneath. We're gonna do the converter bolts. So we have two 13 bolts for the starter. We take those out, and then we're gonna push the starter out of the way. And then there's a little cover for the access. So when you push the starter back, your little access cover is gonna fall on you. Kind of gotta finagle the wires. So it lets you push the starter back. So when you get the starter pushed back enough, your little cover comes out. And this is where you access the bolts for your converter. You can't get them because it's sealed, it's a closed bell housing. So you got to get them from the side here. So we got a little ratchet. We're going to turn our engine over to get to the bolts from the crank pulley. Get on the crank pulley, spin the engine around until we can get to our bolts. They're going to be pretty tight. Well, hopefully they're pretty tight. If not, then there's more problems, but they're going to be pretty tight. There you go. First one's out. Spin the engine over, get the next one. Keep doing this till you get them all out. All right, so we got our converter bolts out, all three. We're gonna hit the lower bell housing bolts, 15mm. Then now we're gonna move the jack over to the front of the truck and we're gonna put it on the pan. So when we lower it down, it's gonna rest on the torsion bar. It'll hold the tranny so it won't go down too far and run the fan into the shroud and everything. So lower the jack down so the output hits the torsion bar cross member. Move the jack around to the front of the vehicle now. We're gonna put it on the pan, jack it back up, and we're gonna take the transfer case off. So you can see I put a piece of 2x8, whatever that thing is, 2x6, on top of the jack, because if you use just a jack in the center of the pan, it'll put a dent in it. You wanna support the weight evenly. You wanna get it out to the edge of the pan, and then it'll support it. You don't want to be all the way in the front. Even the front is a little heavier with the converter in it. You want to be back a little bit. So there's 6 nuts that go around, hold the transfer case to the output shaft, okay? So I normally save the easiest one to get to last. The other ones, you know, all the way around first. Just work on the side and go all the way around. So you can see this has the vent for the purge valve all the way up here. If you're wondering why it's all the way up here, there's a bolt-in on that and it's supposed to be all the way up here. It's actually supposed to be ran a little bit further up into the bell housing. Be up a little higher, but it's almost done right. But it's supposed to be up this far. That's why it's up here now. So we'll just get that cut loose, get that out of the way a second. And you want to unplug your output speed sensors before you get all the nuts loose. You got a harness over here. Pop it loose in the lock, and you got another harness up top here. You want to take the lock off. And this one's got a manual shift transfer case. So you got to take the rod off for the shifter. So you can just use a pry bar. So the best way to do it is to take it off of the shifter so it goes with the transfer case, so it's not in the way when you're trying to do the tranny. This thing has a little clips on it, kind of like a strut, like a hood strut or a rear hatch strut. So you just take the little locking tab off and it pops right off. Ooh, make sure it doesn't try to come give you a kiss. Okay, so that guy's out of the way. So you just want to make sure now that all your electrical is all off the transfer case. Make sure your harness is free. And then you have a vent on this side, a hose that runs up So get your vent off, okay, and then you can get the last two. So like I said, I saved this one to the last. I got one more up top. So now you want to get a pan. It's got a gasket in between the two, but it's still gonna have fluid that's gonna come out of it. So just set your pan here before you take the last one out. Get our pan set up, take our last one out. So you want to get the majority of the fluid out. And once the majority of it's out, it's going to slide back, and then it's going to nosedive to come out. All right, so it's pretty much done dripping. So we can get our pan out of the way. It's probably going to make more of a mess, so we'll leave a rag here for it. So we're going to come back, nosedive it, and come on out. Okay, set it down. So now the transfer case is out of the way. Now we can get the tranny out. We already got the converter bolts. So now we're going to lower the jack down a little bit. Now that the output shaft, the bottom of the output shaft's not going to hit the torsion bar cross member, we can come down a little bit more on the tranny. So we're going to lower the tranny down a little bit. Don't get too crazy though, because you don't want the fan hitting the shroud and in the intake hitting the firewall or anything. So just come down a little bit so you can get to the upper bolts. So now we're going to bring it down a little bit so we can get the harness, cooler lines and everything off the tranny. So I'm going to go lower the jack. Then we're gonna get the bell housing bolts off this thing. They're gonna crap their pants when they watch me pull that transfer case down by myself. Yeah. They're gonna be like, what the heck? Got Hercules? That's gonna be a comment in the thing. Freaking Hercules doing that training? People will be like, I can't do that by myself. That's gonna kill somebody. You better put a disclaimer on there. Be careful before you try to pull the tranny down. So there's a harness bracket on this side. It's just a little 8mm. It's a bracket for the fuel lines and the harness and everything. So just unbolt that from the tranny. So on this side here, you have your range switch. So if your range switch doesn't want to come apart, they normally put like a wax in there, like a plastic they melt in. This one's an older style, so it comes apart. It's got a little lock. Get your range switch unplugged. And we already got the two of the bell housing. So we got two on the side, and then there's one up a little bit. So it's pretty much, what is there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it should be 6. So it's 8 total. So we're gonna get the two on this side. All right, so we got those two side ones out. So the next one up has a 13mm nut on it that holds the bracket. So first you gotta get the nut off for the 13. So you kind of got to get either a long extension or put a couple together. So we're gonna put a couple together because we're using general tools. We're doing it like anybody can do it. So we're gonna double up our extensions and we're gonna put our 13. So we got 13 semi-deep wobbly. Well, maybe that's not a general tool, but we're calling it a general tool. You can just put the flashlight up here and it can just hang out, give you some nice light. You gotta snake your socket past the fuel lines. Working on your way to the little 13 nut. That's gonna get the harness and the fuel line bracket out of the way. So you gotta slide it off, it's a stud, and that gets you a little more room. And then now you gotta go back in there with your 15 and get your bell housing bolt. All right, so we got the last one out. So now I'm gonna go over to that side, get the last 3. We'll get this tranny out of here. So on this side, okay, we're gonna get the upper 2 bell housing bolts, and we're gonna save this last one, the easy one to get to. We're gonna save that until we're ready to pull the tranny out. We don't want the tranny to all of a sudden come out when we're doing the top ones. Okay, so we're gonna do this upper bell housing bolt here. Okay, has the dipstick on it, so it's got a 13 nut, and then there's the upper one has a nut on it also. So we're gonna take this 13 nut off now. This one's a little too tight for my little impact, so we gotta break it loose. The dipstick's gonna stay. So as we come down, I'm gonna pull the dipstick out of the tranny. There's not enough room for the dipstick to come down because it goes up over the head. Keep that in mind. So now we gotta kind of push it up out of the way. So it's gonna come up out of the tranny. Being that we drained that fluid, we don't have to worry about that's another reason why we took the pan off, so we pulled the dipstick out of it. It's not gonna puke fluid all over us. All right, so I just went up top, pulled the dipstick up, made it easier, pulled it out of the tranny. So now we can access our other bell housing bolt. So that's a 15. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to break this loose by hand like the other side, because if you get a lot of extensions like this, you try to use a little impact, it just all rattles and it won't break the bolt loose. Get a vent on top of the tranny you don't want to forget about. Okay, so unplug that. All right, so we gotta go back to our 13. It's all the way on the top, it's all the way in the center. Okay, is your last one. So right there, 13 milli. So now we gotta get the bracket. I think what it holds the vent. So we gotta get up in there, sneak your arm up there and get that off of there. You kinda gotta get your dipstick out of the way. Everything wants to be in the way at this point to get to that last bolt. Cram your arm up in there. Get that off the stud. So now that we got the bracket out of the way, we gotta go back to our 15mm. We gotta snake this up there, get the last bell housing bolt. All right, we got it out, but it's up there hanging out. All right, so now the last thing we need to do now is we need to take these cooler lines off, okay? And then we're gonna do that last bell housing bolt we're gonna drop the tranny. So it's gonna do the same thing. It's gonna leak a little bit when you take those cooler lines off. But we don't really have room for the pan, and we still have the cardboard here, so we should be okay. So it has these little locking tabs. You pull the little locking tabs back. There's a little clip in here, and I just got just a little pick, 90-degree little pick. And take the clip out. You can leave those cooler lines in there until the last second. Here's what those clips look like. Just little spring clips, okay, there's 2 of them. So now that you got the clips out to retain that, you can leave those lines in there. So now we're gonna jack up our tranny because the thing's just sitting here. So we're gonna center the jack up, get a little bit forward. We're gonna jack it up just a little bit, get the load on the jack it up, and then we're gonna take our last bell housing bolt out. We're gonna lower this thing down, take it out. So we're all ready to drop this thing down. There's just one more, there's a little cover on the passenger side here. Or driver's side, I should say, sorry. It kind of locks in the tranny. So we got that guy out of there, you see it right here. So that's the last thing, so now we should be ready to pull it out. So I'm gonna steady the jack, or I'm gonna steady the tranny on the jack, and my trusty assistant is gonna lower the jack. So sometimes this trannies get stuck on the dowel pins, so you gotta prime off the dowel pins a little bit. So lower it down a little bit, and let's see what we got. Pull the jack towards you just a little bit, and then jack it up just a hair. Right there. Okay, so you wanna reach up in there when you get a little bit of space. You can pop out this access panel either way. You wanna make sure that the converter's coming with it. Okay, come on down just a hair. Come on down slow. Well, that's okay. Converter's in there, okay, good, come on down. Okay, hold on a second, let me double check these. Harnesses are all good. Okay, keep coming down. Okay, so we're all the way down there. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold the tranny and I'm gonna kind of tilt it back, and then he's gonna pull the jack out from underneath it, okay? So I'm gonna tilt this thing and you're gonna pull it towards you slowly. And it's just gonna cruise off the jack, okay? Just like so. Okay, so now you got the tranny on the floor. So now you need to determine if we jack it up a little bit more, we can go all the way out the front with this tranny. So we're gonna take the jack, we're gonna come to one side or the other, either passenger side or the driver's side. We're gonna jack up on the frame, get it up just a little bit, and we're gonna slide this tranny. We're just gonna pull it out on the cardboard all the way out the front of the truck. So we're gonna leave the jack stand there because I'm gonna, climb underneath this thing. Even though it'll fall a little bit, if it did fall, but it's not gonna come all the way down to get me. So I'm just gonna grab the tranny and I'm just gonna slide it out the front. Hopefully it doesn't slide me out. So there you have it. How to remove a 4L60E transmission on the ground, jack stands, floor jack, pretty much basic hand tools. The only thing that was out of the ordinary is my little electric impact, but pretty much do it with hand tools. So that's pretty much how you pull a tranny. If you want to do it yourself, there you go, man. Conquer it. You can do it.
Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed the video of us pulling out that 4L60E. Stay tuned for the next video on that truck. We're going to be installing the rebuilt transmission. We're going to rebuild that transmission that we pulled out, and we're going to reinstall it in the truck without a rack and without power tools, the same way we took it out. So stay tuned for that. If you're new around here, go down below, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button and show some support. Here are some videos for you to check out right about here, and hopefully we can get the 68 C10 done pretty soon. I would like to get a video out on that because it's starting to come together pretty good. I'm looking at it right now, but I don't want to spoil anything right now. So, see you guys next time. Hope you have a good one.